Welcome to my video showing a mini unboxing followed by the swatching and a painting of this Comb Crested Jacana running around the lily pads with its two chicks. But I didn't paint the chicks, I only painted the parent bird. I'm totally fascinated with the length of her toes. That's why she can run around on the lily pads and look like she's walking on water. Now for the unboxing and the swatching. I wasn't planning on buying this set of Tundra watercolours. I had decided that I really wanted a tube of Tundra pink. So I drove all the way to the art shop and they didn't have any Tundra pink, but they had this set. And I thought, well, I was planning to buy them one tube at a time, but the set was there and I'd driven a long distance, so I thought I'll just get the set. And then I discovered it was the last set they had as well. So, lucky I went there to get it, but that's also why it didn't need to come out of a postage bag, because I went to the shop to get it. And now I've written all the colours down and I'm going to swatch them there for you. Another thing I should let you know is the fingernails. I realised after I'd started doing this that I had a red thumbnail. A friend of mine had given me a bottle of red nail polish and I decided to paint my thumb. And the next day I just decided I'd paint all of my fingers. So you'll see a little bit of variety in the nail polish in this video. Hopefully it's entertaining rather than annoying. According to the Shimki Horodam website, 5 stars is extremely light fast and 4 stars is good light fastness. The little squares, the clear squares, say that's transparent, and the square with a line through it is semi-transparent, and the filled in black square is opaque, and the little triangles refer to staining. The clear triangle indicates non-staining. The triangle that is half clear and half black is semi-staining, and the black triangle filled in with black says that it is staining. I did this swatching on a little A5 sheet of my Montmartre paper, which I've decided probably is not cotton based. It doesn't say anything about cotton on its front page. Here's the swatching after it's dried. I'm going to swatch the colours that I'm going to use for the little bird by doing a painting on an A4 sheet of the Montmartre paper. It's very thin, this paper. The paper that I used for the swatching is 300 GSM, but this is only 140 GSM. I had done the drawing onto the paper, and then I thought it's going to be really difficult to paint this on such thin paper if I don't stretch it. So I decided I would stretch it, and I found an old canvas board that I hadn't used, and I used that as the backing board, and I stuck the paper with the drawing on it. We're using masking tape because I couldn't find my proper art tape. So I thought I'd show you the process I've used. I'll tape it down to that canvas board. You can see how it's curling up already. I've wet one side of it. When I turned it over, it actually rolled up like a rolled up newspaper. Now that I've wet the drawing, I don't think I'll be able to rub it out, because I'm pretty sure that you can't get rid of the graphite once it's been wet. I'll just paint over it. This is only as a creative form of swatching anyway. It's not actually meant to be a painting that I'm going to be hanging on the wall or getting framed or anything. It is an old sheet of paper, and I was wondering if the sizing would have been affected, and only noticed a problem with the very edges on the borders there. It became transparent when I wet it, but that won't be painted on. I'm going to be taping it down. That'll be under the tape, so it's not a problem at this time. It would have been a problem if it had been in the middle of the page, but it's not in the middle of the page. That's good. And I couldn't find my proper tape, so I've used masking tape, which will probably tear the paper when I take it off anyway. But I'm not too worried about this one. It's just meant for me to work out the colours, because I'm not familiar with any of these colours. They're all new to me, so I don't know what they'll behave like when I put them on the paper. So I thought before I put them in my little sketchbook, which I want to keep, I will experiment and I will do the full painting here using all of the colours so I can find out how they work. The paper was now soaking wet and way too wet to work on, so I set it aside to dry and came back the next day having a look at the colours I was thinking of using. I ended up not using all of these colours. Some of the colours I did use and others I didn't use, and I did add a couple of colours that I didn't have in this collection. This painting was an experiment. I decided I would use masking fluid because I have played with it a little bit, but I haven't used it very much, and I wanted to see what would happen if I put masking fluid on this paper and left it there for a few days while I did the painting. The masking fluid had been sitting untouched for months, so I gave it a good stir by just carefully moving the bottle around in circles, careful not to put bubbles in it by shaking it. I gathered together a couple of my old brushes as well as 2 of my silicone paint moulding tools, and in the end I decided to only use that silicone paint moulding tool for the whole application of the masking fluid. I had a little cake of soap there as well for the brushes, but I didn't use it because I didn't use the brushes. I poured a tiny amount of masking fluid into the lid of a water bottle. I didn't want to pour too much masking fluid out because I didn't think I'd need very much. At first I was a bit tentative with the application of the masking fluid, but then I just went for it. I decided that I would cover in all of the larger areas of the bird and some of the leaves that are lying on top of the water. I had seen that you shouldn't really use it over large areas because it will tend to rip the paper, but I was trying to see what I could get away with this picture, and I was prepared to accept paper getting torn. I just wanted to see what the masking fluid would do. I had to wait for the masking fluid to dry properly, and then it was time to apply the paint. So I've used Green Apatite Genuine here. The water was quite green, and you can see how it's reacting to the masking fluid. I didn't cover the whole bird with masking fluid, so I've got to be a bit careful here and there. But you can see where I did use the masking fluid. I'm still experimenting with watercolour brushes. This one is a very cheap Wholecraft brush. It doesn't really go to much of a point, but I'm finding it's quite comfortable to use when applying large areas of paint. I've been experimenting with my light and camera positioning as well, and I think I've just about got it conquered, but at this point I've zoomed in a bit too far. But at least you're getting a good close-up look at what I'm doing. After waiting for the paint to dry thoroughly, it was time to start removing the masking fluid. I was being very careful and it all came off perfectly, but I only took it from the top of the painting. I didn't take it all off. I wanted to see how it would go if I left it on for a few more days. So I just took it off gradually. There's enough coming off now for me to be able to continue painting. As you can see, the wash that I put on for the water, it's got very horizontal stripes in it. That was reasonably intentional because when you're painting water, you need to have the horizontal lines. You don't want it all over the place because water is flat and it will read better as water if it's got some horizontal lines in it, but at the moment it's nowhere near that point. It's just an undercoat that I've put on there. The water was very dark in the photo that I'm using as a reference, and now I'm using Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. The Green Apatite Genuine was also by Daniel Smith. Looking at the reflections, you can see how this paper is buckling slightly, even though I've got it stretched. That's because it's so thin. The photo I'm using of the little bird, it's running around on the lily pads, so there's lots of plant growth in amongst the dark water, and that's why it's so patchy, the way I'm trying to represent what I see in the photo. And now I'm starting to add some Bordeaux, because a lot of the leaves have got lots of red in them, and I've mixed the Bordeaux with a mixture of the two greens that I've used already in the painting. The leaves aren't that red as they would have been if I just used full strength Bordeaux, so I've toned it back a lot. Red and green are complementary colours, so by mixing them together you get a greyer version of the two colours. And by having slightly more Bordeaux than green in the mix, well, then it's reading as a reddish grey or pinkish grey rather than a greenish grey. And by adjusting the proportions of the Bordeaux and the greens in the mix, I'm coming up with a variety of different reds and greys to use in the foliage that's floating on the water. Wait for the paint to dry thoroughly and then start removing more of the masking fluid. I discovered while I was painting that the masking fluid I had previously removed hadn't fully come off. I'm using an eraser or rubber here, and I'm finding it's leaving little bits of masking fluid stuck to the paper, so I'm going to have to change tactics. I ended up using my fingernail to scrape it off, just to get rid of it all, otherwise there'll be masking fluid permanently attached to the painting. At this point I have added a bit of Michael Harding olive green and Daniel Smith's Blue Apatite Genuine to the greens that I am using. The paint has been allowed to dry and I have now removed all of the masking fluid. I did have a little accident on the bird's leg. In the middle of the screen there, it actually tore a little bit of paper. It didn't tear completely off. By that time the masking fluid had been on the page for about 4 days, so I'll know not to leave it on that long next time I'm using this type of paper and masking fluid. I have to fix that up when I start painting. I'm starting to try to add in some details, and I've added iridescent jade and buff titanium, both by Daniel Smith, to the colours that I'm now using. Starting to get an awful lot of different colours in here. It'll probably turn out totally muddy, but that's okay. Hopefully I'll know which colours to leave out. At this point I'm thinking I probably won't want to continue with buff titanium or the iridescent jade. I was hoping that the iridescent jade would give a bit of a pale glow to the green lily pads that were reflecting lots of UV light in the photo, but didn't seem to have much of that effect. And I was a bit concerned that having bits and pieces of disorganised, blotchy, iridescent paint all over the painting probably wasn't going to be a good look in the long run, although I couldn't really notice it by the time I'd finished. I skipped a bit here because I thought I'm just fiddling around with the water. Now I'm ready to start working on the bird. As you can see in the original photo, there is a lot of black on the bird, but for this painting I didn't use any black watercolour. Instead, I mixed together my undersea green with some Peroline violet to make a very dark mixture that I used instead of black. I assume the bird's legs were actually a pale grey, but they were reflecting all sorts of colours. There were greens and lots of dark colours in there as well. So I wasn't quite sure how to approach it, so I just did the best I could with what I could see in the photo. The underbody below the black part and just above where it joins the legs was white, but it was reflecting the green of the water, so it was greenish in the photo. So I used a bit of green there as well because the water was reflecting up onto the white of the bird. The neck was a mixture of colours, and I used the nickel azo yellow on parts of the neck and left the rest of it white. And the comb crest on its head was a mixture of Winsor & Newton's Winsor Orange Red shade and Pearl Scarlet. And then I repeated the greenish colour and the dark of the legs in the reflection that you can see at the very bottom of the photo. I used the brush to lift out a bit of that green directly underneath the bird's body there, to try to put a bit of contrast between the water and the bird. I think that the use of the buff titanium and the iridescent jade added to the muddiness of the final result. I'll leave them out when I do the little watercolour in my little blue sketchbook. Hopefully it will look like our watercolour is supposed to look. But watercolours are supposed to glow, and this one is not glowing. Too many different colours, too many different greens, mainly is the main problem, I think. But this was supposed to be a swatching exercise as well as giving me some idea of how these colours work together, because for most of the colours that I've used here, I've never used them before other than to do a little swatching. In the next video I will show you the swatching I've done for all of the colours that I've bought so far. That's nickel azo yellow I've just put on the neck there. And that's Winsor & Newton's Winsor Orange Red shade. And while it's still wet, I'll add a bit of Pearl Scarlet. A touch of red certainly has a dramatic effect on the painting. But the bird itself in real life was very hard to see when it was on the lily pads in the lake. Those long toes, I don't think the picture I've done here does them justice. They are just so abnormally long, and compared to the bird's body, it lets them, they just run around on top of the lily pads and looks for all the world like they're actually running on water. Their name is Comb Crested Jacana. Jacana. And this one has two little chicks with it, but I didn't put them in the painting. So that is, the black that I'm doing there now is a mixture of undersea green and Perylene Violet. I didn't put it too close to the neck because that yellow was still wet. But after the yellow dried, I went back over the black again. And this is the scan I made of the finished work. You see, you can't see where it tore on the leg there. I glued it down with paint as I was painting the leg. So now it's time to have another go, this time in the little sketchbook. I have used a lot less colour here. Bordeaux, Green Apatite Genuine, Nickel Azo Yellow, Perylene Violet, Pearl Scarlet, Undersea Green, and Windsor Orange red shade. The paper in this little sketchbook that I made many years ago is a much better quality paper. It's professional quality paper. And I've learned a bit about applying the paint from doing the original painting, the test run. Hopefully the combination of better quality paper and a much reduced selection of colour will result in a more interesting and pleasing painting. However, it's a very small page and I am struggling still with the details, making it in such a small scale. The page that I'm painting on now is about half or a quarter of the size of the one that I've just finished painting. It won't take us long to paint though, will it? I'm using a disposable plastic plate as my palette this time. I decided not to put washi tape around the outside, so it's not going to have such a tidy finish around the edges as the other paintings did. I can't help myself. I'm using a photo as a reference and I just have to try to do what's in the photo. I'm not doing exact like a photo, but I'm not just being creative here totally. The next episode I am going to have to be totally creative because I've chosen to do a little ornament, and it's an ornament that I was given as a present when I was a very small child. I don't remember getting it, I just remember it appeared, and I probably would have been about 2 or 3 years old. It was a little shepherdess with a little green lamb, and over the years it has finally turned to just powder. It's just disintegrated, but before it completely disintegrated I did a drawing of it, planning to do a painting, and that was several years ago. And recently I came across a tracing I did of the drawing, so I'm going to use an A4 sheet of paper to do a painting from that drawing, which is just an outline. There's no shading or anything in it, it's just a drawing, so it's going to be mainly by memory, able to freely be as creative as I want. We shall see what happens. I'll be using some Arches watercolour paper A4 that I've got in a pad that I've found. It is also quite old, it's been over 10 years old, but it should still be okay, and I will use that for the next video. Give the birds a little rest. I have got tens of thousands of photos of birds. I'm never going to paint them all, but I'll paint a few. I put the yellow on the neck of this one, and I added a little bit of orange in it as well, the Windsor Orange red shade. The camera I've been using for my photography of the birds is a Canon 6D, and I'm using a 100mm macro lens. It's a fixed macro lens, I can't zoom with it. And I bought it originally back in 2014 when I was setting out for a drive around Australia with the view to take photos of wildflowers in Western Australia, that I could do paintings of the flowers and have an exhibition of my paintings when I came home. Unfortunately, that exhibition never happened, the paintings never happened. I was too sick. I was diagnosed with severe obstructive sleep apnea, and then I had cancer surgery a couple of years after that, and then I had more surgery a few months ago, and now I've decided I just have to start doing all these paintings. So that's why I've had such a huge break from the art. And this little sketchbook that I made all those years ago, I will be putting flowers in it as well. I've got over 10,000 photos that I took on that drive, and most of them are wildflowers. There's a few scenery shots, and I've also got thousands of photos of roses and other flowers as well that I've been taking over the years. So I've got so much reference material, I'll never run out of it. We'll see how I go, as I don't necessarily enjoy painting from photographs. I was originally taught to go out in the yard, out in the field and paint landscapes from life, or putting a bunch of flowers in a vase and painting that from life, not working from photos. But I've got the photos, and it's not always easy for me to get out. I could go and buy bunches of flowers, I suppose. We'll see what happens. This is just the beginning. That cancer surgery totally cured the problem. Fortunately, found it at stage 1 before anything had spread anywhere. So this is coming to the end of the video now. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have enjoyed it, please give it a like. That might help it have a chance of being viewed by a few more people. And I will see you in the next video. So thank you for watching. And there it is, the final result of the little bird. The Comb Crested Jacana running on the water lilies. Bye bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.